Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me today, where I can finally share the news that the months-long strike is finally over. For the past 2 weeks, it looked like a deal would be done any minute, or that the strike would be heading fast into 2024. But last Tuesday, it was announced formally that a deal had been reached between the Actors Guild and the Union of Producers. So I will go over some of the details from that with you, as well as when your favorite actors can get back to work. Speaking of which, Star Trek is one of those franchises that had a lot of things in the works, both positive and negative, before the writers and actors strike began. Now that these strikes are over, I want to go over each of these projects, where they stand currently, and more importantly, when we can expect to see them. Then I have 2 reviews of MCU projects, the second season of the series Loki, which just finished up this past week, along with the new film The Marvels. But before I get into all that, I want to thank you again for joining me and remind you to hit that like button to help support the work that I do. Also, don't forget to subscribe for future podcasts. All right, so let's talk about the SAG strike and that it is finally over. This news comes to us from Deadline, and it states that after 118 days of the Actors Guild being out on strike, SAG-AFTRA and the studios on Wednesday reached a tentative deal on a new contract that could see Hollywood up and running again within weeks. So the strike was officially over on Thursday, November 9th, and though the full details have not been released of the deal, we do have some highlights of what the actors were able to secure, which the Guild referred to as the total package, and it is valued at more than $1 billion in new wages and benefit plan funding. The agreement includes an unprecedented wage pattern with 2 wage increases in the first year of the contract. Also, wages for background actors will increase by 11%, and then by additional 4% in 2024, and by another 3% in 2025. There's also an increase in contributions to health and pension funds, and the union achieved the creation of a new compensation stream for performers working in streaming, which I know was a really big deal. It provides a substantial bonus on top of existing residual structures, making work in streaming more sustainable for middle-class actors. The contract also achieved important gains for hair and makeup equality, the sharing of aggregate diversity statistics, eliminating inappropriate wiggings and paint downs, gender-neutral language, access to gender-affirming care and translation services. It also provides more sexual harassment prevention protections for performers, including the use of intimacy coordinators in scenes involving nudity and simulated sex or upon request, and additional safeguards for background. I did notice, though, that there's nothing about AI, even though that was supposed to be a big issue with getting the deal done. So maybe we'll know more about that part of the deal once everything gets released. Brass tacks, the deal is done. It has been ratified, I think, by 86% of the actors union. So this is good to go. And I'm recording this on Sunday, but from everything that I hear, actors can go back to work on Monday. So when you're hearing this podcast, many actors will already be back to work. Because this is the holiday season, most productions would have paused anyway. So I hear that there are many productions that are saying they won't start again until 2024, but I do know a few productions have gone back to work. Like I know that Stranger Things is going back to work. I think Cobra Kai is going back to work. And also the Mortal Kombat sequel, the director of that movie came out and said that they're going back to work before the beginning of 2024. So this is great news. I'm very happy to report it. I understand why the strike did have to happen because things were going bad for actors and writers in Hollywood. Whenever there are changes to your work, how you do your work, the way you get paid for it should change as well. And it seemed like the producers were just trying to get away with something for as long as they could. And were even trying to do things to get away with more stuff in the future in regard to like AI with background actors and stuff like that. Stuff I've talked about in prior podcasts. So I am really happy that this all worked out for the actors and writers. It was the longest strike in history for both of them. Hopefully this will lead to things being more smooth for both the actors and the producers in getting productions made in the future. And this will lead to better productions because that's what this was, supposed to be all about. So even though the strike is over, I know that more things have been delayed because now they know when they can push them. You may also have noticed that a lot of actors are now promoting things that came out. I know like the stars of the movie The Blue Beetle, which came out during the strike. Some of them came out and talked about the movie, even though I think it's on streaming by now. But for instance, the film that I'm going to review a little bit later on this podcast, The Marvels, a lot of the stars from that movie came out on Friday and, went to viewings of the movie and started to promote it after not being able to promote it for, the past few months. So you're going to be seeing that in the short term. you're also going to be seeing a lot more delays, but you will see concrete release windows. Some things have been delayed 2-3 times already. And even when they say, the release date, in the back of your mind, a lot of times you're like, well, that's not going to really happen. So I think that that's probably going to stop now. And when we hear a release date in the near future, that will mean that that's when that production is really getting released. I think that Marvel totally mixed up their schedule. I don't have it in front of me, but I know that Deadpool 3, I think, is the next Marvel movie that's coming out. And that will be in 2024, hopefully. But everything else now, I think, has been pushed to 2025. So that's kind of the short and the long term with the state of Hollywood after the strike. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about this news? Do you think that this was worth it after hearing, what the actors kind of gained? Do you think it was worth basically sitting out for almost 120 days and, costing the state of California billions of dollars and costing a lot of people jobs and stuff like that? But in the long term, getting more for the people that are working. Do you think that that worked out well? I think the consensus is that this is a good deal for the actors, just like the writers got a pretty good deal. So whatever they were trying to do, it looks like they were able to do it. I know that in a lot of cases, a lot of this stuff was the same language that was asked on the first day of the strike. So it's almost like, why did we have this strike in the first place? If these producers would have just, came to their senses earlier, we wouldn't have these delays and all this bad blood in Hollywood. But I'm happy about this news. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about this news? And are you happy that the strike is over? So next, I want to talk about Star Trek, because that's a franchise that has a lot of productions kind of in one state or the other of being released. And some things we have been given updates on, but other things we haven't heard about in a while. So I want to go over each project here and kind of tell you where they currently are and when we can expect to see new content from that series or film. So first, let's talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because that has become the flagship project for Paramount Plus when it comes to Star Trek. So Star Trek Strange New Worlds just finished their second season. It finished up before the strikes. And then the third season was supposed to begin filming in Toronto the week before the strike took effect in May. So this means that there is a possibility that season 3 could begin filming soon before the end of the year. But as I mentioned before, due to most productions not filming during the holiday season, it may be pushed to the beginning of 2024. So this is good news that they were all set to film and everything. But because this strike is ending right before a lot of productions would have gone on pause anyway, they basically missed the whole second half of 2023 and now will probably begin in 2024. What this means is that we probably won't see season 3 into 2025, but there is a slight possibility that we could see it in 2024. Season 2 did end on a pretty sharp cliffhanger, so fans are eager to see what happens next with the crew of the Enterprise. And as I just mentioned, Strange New Worlds is really the best thing that Star Trek has going for it right now on Paramount. So while I don't think they'll rush the production because they're so close to being ready, I bet they really will hit the ground running when they film in hopefully January. And maybe possibly we'll see it before the end of 2024, just so there isn't a whole, year and a half in between seasons. But then again, a lot of series will be going through this same thing because everybody has been affected by the strike. So maybe the producers at Paramount will think that, the audience is already experiencing this with a lot of other productions and a lot of other series and films. So maybe we can get away with it too. But I really would like to see Strange New Worlds as soon as possible. So I hope that it does get released before the end of 2024. While the season was written before the writer's strike took place, since the writer's strike ended about a month ago, there's been about, I think, a little bit less than a month between the end of the writer's strike and the actor's strike. The writers on the third season of Strange New Worlds have continued to work on the season. So they've done touch-ups or they've done any changes that they thought needed to happen before the filming began. So hopefully that'll mean that this will be a better season, because maybe this is stuff that they were able to think about and work on because of the, lack of work basically during the strike. And now maybe these episodes will be better. As far as we know, it will be a 10-episode season. I know there was a rumor that maybe Paramount would go all in on Strange New Worlds and perhaps make this a 20-episode season, not just because it's been so long between season 2 and season 3, but it's actually cheaper for a studio to produce 2 seasons back to back than it is for there to be some kind of buffer, because you only have to fly actors in once and all that kind of like logistical stuff. It's easier to do. So maybe we'll see that. I know that it's been a while since the actors on Strange New Worlds have filmed, so hopefully they remember all these characters and stuff. I did see online that certain members of the crew have released behind-the-scenes photos of filming some episodes from season 2, and it looks like they had a lot of fun. So I'm sure those actors are ready and willing to get back to work, and I am very hopeful to see them back on screen before the end of 2024. Now let's go on to the last new thing of Star Trek that we saw, and that was Star Trek Lower Decks. So we just watched the 4th season of Star Trek Lower Decks. The production of the 5th season of Star Trek Lower Decks was not affected by either strike, since it is an animated show, although it did seem like stars of the show were not able to promote the 4th season while it aired. But behind the scenes, they were able to work on the 5th season, so there shouldn't be much of a delay in that coming to our screens. So Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 is now one of the 3 new seasons of Star Trek that fans will for sure see in 2024. I just talked about Strange New Worlds and said that maybe we'll see it in 2024, so that would be the 4th new season of Star Trek. But this is one of 3 that I'm going to talk about that is for sure. So for sure, we will see the 5th season of Lower Decks in 2024. It is set to be released in the late summer, early fall timeframe. The next 2 shows I'm going to talk about will probably be released before Lower Decks. So this will probably be the 3rd thing that we see in 2024. But it is cool to know that we will get more Lower Decks in the next year. And Lower Decks has not yet been renewed for a 6th season, with most fans hoping that there will be a 2-season renewal once it is announced. I know that Mike McMahon is a huge Star Trek fan and has talked a lot about how he would love, he'd love to do this show forever, of course, but he'd love to at least get 7 seasons because the quote unquote successful Star Trek shows, Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine did get 7 seasons and got to really, plot out a lot of character development for those characters. Now, having said that, Lower Decks has only got 10 episodes a season, so all in all, they'll still have a lot less content, but it would be cool to see at least 7 seasons of Lower Decks. I did a review of the 4th season that I just released last week, and I also did a compilation video of every Easter egg from the 4th season in a second video that I released on my main channel, What Did I Miss? So I'll put those links in the description of this video if you'd like to check those out after you listen to this podcast. But yeah, I love Lower Decks, so I am very much looking forward to this coming back, and especially since I'm going to get to see it in 2024. The next bit of Star Trek that we will for sure see in 2024 is kind of bittersweet, and that is the 5th and final season of Star Trek Discovery. Now, while Season 5 of Discovery was initially filmed between June and November of 2022, after Paramount announced in March of 2023 that Season 5 would be the final season of the show, they returned for 2 months of reshoots, and all that happened before the writers and actors strike. So that was not affected at all, as far as I know, by the strikes taking place. The 5th season is still set to be released early in 2024, so we can expect promotion beginning before the end of this year. And I would expect perhaps a new trailer and definitely some interviews with the cast and crew talking about, the impact of Discovery and going into the final season, because the final season of a show is always a big deal. An initial trailer for the 5th season was released that showed off some of the new characters, including a full scene from presumably the 1st episode. Since Discovery will be the only live-action Star Trek series on Paramount in 2024, and this is their last season, there's a possibility that this will make people care about it more or less than the past couple of seasons of Discovery. So sometimes when it's the last season of a show, nobody cares about it because it's not going anywhere. But in this case, Star Trek Discovery may see kind of a resurgence because, for one, we know that we're not going to see Strange New Worlds for a while. So live action Star Trek, if we want to watch live action Star Trek, Discovery may be our only choice for at least a year. Plus the fact that it is its last season and 1, maybe 2 characters that are on the show may actually move on to other things. And I'm going to talk about those other things here in a little bit. Maybe this will make people tune in more and make the show a little bit more popular than it has been the past couple of seasons because of, these extenuating circumstances. I know with Picard, their 3rd season was their most popular season, but that had a lot to do with not only the fact that it was the last season, but they had all the characters from the Next Generation coming back. Discovery doesn't necessarily have that as far as we know. The only thing it really has going for it is it's the only live action Star Trek in 2024 on Paramount, and 2, it is going into its last season, and some of the characters may actually move on to other things. So I think that this will probably be a pretty popular season for Discovery. Now, will it be a good season? That has to do with the writers and, where they plan to take this. I do like that they return for 2 months of reshoots and that this will be like a proper send-off. It's not just going to end like a normal season of Discovery. It sounds like we will get some kind of, finale. I don't think they're going to come back to normal time. I know that a lot of people think that that's what's going to be the end of Discovery. I tend to think it's going to have some tie-in with that short trek where they found that Discovery was abandoned and nobody had been on it for like many, many years. I think maybe even hundreds of years. And that it actually was the pre-refit version of Discovery. So I think it's somehow going to tie back into that. I hope it does, because that would be nice. It would be stupid just to be like, oh yeah, we forgot about that, So hopefully we see some kind of tie-in to that. But either way, we will get new Discovery in 2024. And like I said, it's kind of bittersweet because it will be its final season. Another Star Trek show that, quite frankly, is probably happy to be heading into its final season is Star Trek Prodigy. And I say that because after the second season of the series was originally set to debut on Paramount in late 2023, the streamer decided to cancel it in June before it aired and instead shopped the season around to potential suitors. In October, Netflix acquired the rights to the series and announced later that the first season would be available on Christmas this year and that the second season would be released in 2024. So that is some huge news that has happened with Prodigy. I've mentioned on my podcast before that the strike probably helped Prodigy more than any other series because after it was canceled, it had a second season in the bag. And it even has, people from the Star Trek universe that people recognize on the show. The fact that that was already ready to go and all these streamers were going to be looking for new content because the strike happened, I thought that that was pretty, good for Prodigy and that somebody would probably pick up that second season. And lo and behold, Netflix swooped in and did just that. Concerning the second season, Robert Picardo has been added to the series as his character from Voyager, the Dr. EMH program. I think he's playing the actual same character and not another EMH. I think that from the trailer that was released, it does look like that is the same character, or supposed to be the same character. So somehow he is integrated with the plotline, which is pretty cool. I mean, they got Robert Beltran in the first season too to reprise his role as Chakotay. And I just mentioned Kate Mulgrew as Catherine Janeway. Like Discovery, expect promotion to begin for Prodigy on Netflix now that the actors can promote the show. So like I just mentioned, we're going to see a trailer probably for Discovery pretty soon. We're probably going to see something new for Prodigy pretty soon. And we're going to see a lot of people talking about it online now that the actor strike is over. So even with this strike in 2024, we will be getting 3 new seasons of Star Trek, even though 2 of those shows are probably heading into their last season. Discovery for sure, Prodigy probably, unless they do huge on Netflix and Netflix decides to buy another season. But Netflix seems pretty cheap when it comes to that. So I would not hold my breath. I would just be happy if I'm a Prodigy fan that I am getting another season and that second season, I'm actually going to see it. But I don't know that there will be a third season. I could be wrong. Prodigy could be a hit for them. But going on like the history of Netflix, I would expect the second season to be the last season. But either way, we still will get 3 seasons of new Star Trek, possibly 4 if Strange New Worlds can get on Paramount Plus before the end of the year, because none of these things will be released towards the end of the year. So hopefully Paramount will want to release something for Star Trek towards the end of the year in 2024. And maybe we could start to see Strange New Worlds, or at least start to see trailers and, start to get hyped up for the next season of Strange New Worlds and possibly get it in January of 2025. So now I'm going to talk about a few things that are in the pipeline, but we don't exactly know when they will be released to the public. And the first thing that I need to talk about is the 4th film in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek universe. This would be the sequel to 2016's Star Trek Beyond that would have some or all of the cast of the J.J. Abrams universe return. After multiple different scripts and directors, the project was thought to be dead after director Matt Shakman left in 2022. Various actors such as Chris Pine, Sofia Boutella, and Zachary Quinto have expressed interest in returning, but everyone in the cast has seemingly moved on to other projects. I mean, Sofia Boutella is one of the main characters in the new Rebel Moon franchise that Zack Snyder is releasing with Netflix. Carl Urban obviously has The Boys, and he's like the main character for that. Zoe Saldana is in Avatar, and they're making like 4 or 6. I don't even know how many more Avatar movies they're making, but she's a big part of that. And a lot of the other actors have moved on as well. So it's really hard, I think, to get all these characters back in a movie because all these actors would be so hard to rehire. So I think that that's one of the things that's really going to hurt this movie. And it sounds like they already have a script that they're working from. But if that script does include a lot of these characters, I would say that they would probably have to, start back at the drawing board. However, one of the writers of the screenplay that this movie is supposed to be based on stated recently that she believes the project is still moving forward at Paramount and that the studio is currently searching for a new director. Also, besides the actors returning, many characters from this cast are now on the series Strange New Worlds, and the general public seems to be tired of multiverse stories. So it may be best just to move on with Strange New Worlds. I'm going to talk about a multiverse story here before the end of this podcast. And really, it seems like the public is just tired of, all these different threads, and they're tired of having to know so many things before sitting down and watching a movie. And I think if you have, the cast of Strange New Worlds and you're promoting Strange New Worlds and you see, Spock as this actor and you see Uhura as this actress, and then you see these characters again on the big screen, I think it becomes confusing. And then when you start to explain it to somebody, be like, oh, it's like the multiverse, they just tune out because people are just tired of multiverse stories. So I think that that's a problem for a fourth film in the Star Trek universe. I have said that I don't think that this universe needs to continue. I think if they just went with the 3 that were released, I think you could still say that was a successful attempt at, rebooting the Star Trek universe and kind of go a different way. And I think that that would behoove, the current climate more because big movies are really failing right now. And to set Star Trek up for failure like that by having to rehire these actors at these really high amounts, well, then how are you going to not produce a big budget film when a lot of your budget is already going into getting these actors back? So I think that that's a problem. I think that Strange New Worlds can be a problem now because remember, Strange New Worlds wasn't on TV when the J.J. Abrams movies were being released. So they haven't had to, live in the same market yet. And I think that that could hurt both of them. I don't think it's going to help either, Star Trek 4 or Strange New Worlds to have both of them out there with the same characters at the same time. So that's just my 2 cents, but it does seem like Paramount still thinks that they can do this movie. If they do, I'd love to see, what they come up with. I think it'll be very hard for this film to be successful. What I've said in the past is that they should try and make a lower budget Star Trek film, not have any characters from the Enterprise, make it in some corner of the Star Trek universe, and do it low budget with someone like Gareth Edwards, who just did The Creator. And then if you do it like that, the expectations are not as high, and you don't have to make a $200 million movie. You can just make a good movie, and that's what Star Trek needs. So that's the way that I would handle it. I don't work for Paramount, obviously, but if you're listening, Paramount, that's how you should do it. So that's kind of the update we have with the next film in the Star Trek J.J. Abrams universe. It could still happen, but I don't know anyone that really wants to see it. Let me know in the comments if that's you, if you'd like to see another movie in the J.J. Abrams universe. One movie that we know is coming out in the Star Trek universe is the Section 31 film. Now, in 2021, the character Philippa Georgiou was written out of Star Trek Discovery to allow Michelle Yeoh to star in a spin-off based on Section 31. This had first been pitched by the actress in 2018. I love that about this story more than anything else, that, Michelle Yeoh is such a badass that she was just like, I love this character. I have an idea. I think we can do this. And the studio is like, heck yeah, like for sure, let's do this, because that kind of energy is infectious, like not just to the people that produce, whatever we're going to see. It's going to come through in her character. It's going to come through in her performance, and it's going to make for a better end product. And I just love that about this story, that she was actually kind of the thing that started this, that got this off the ground. And now, years later, they are still going to make this movie. In April of 2023, Alex Kurtzman announced that Section 31 would be an event film that would be released on Paramount Plus. Depending on the popularity of the film, this could lead to more event films in the franchise, as well as future appearances for the character. So this could be a one and done for the character Philippa Georgiou. It could introduce new characters. It could introduce an anthology kind of event film series, which I think would be best. I think that would be cool if like every year we got a different Paramount Plus release that was, a film, not a series, and it followed a different corner of the Star Trek universe like Section 31. This film will be based on a script written by Craig Sweeney, who also worked on Star Trek Discovery. I don't know for sure, but it sounds like the script for this film is something they've been working off, and while there's probably been a few different permutations, it does seem like this is the original idea that they had way back in 2021 or maybe even 2018, and they're just doing it as an event film. Expect casting announcements soon for this movie, as well as a production schedule. The filming will almost definitely have to accommodate for Michelle Yeoh's busy schedule, which means we will probably not see this film in the 2025. And that's kind of expected. I mean, if this is going to kick off something new for Star Trek, they do want to kind of, take their time with it. So the fact that they have a script is great. Maybe they have a cast in mind, and we could see a couple characters, come back from Star Trek Discovery. I think that we might see Michael Burnham in this movie. This will be coming out after Star Trek Discovery is already off the air for a while. So maybe people will want to see Michael Burnham again. And of course, she has such a hard tie to Phil Bajorjo. It wouldn't make sense for her to show up again. So of any characters from Discovery, I could see Burnham coming back. And there is possibility that other characters, earlier on in the Star Trek Discovery journey for Phil Bajorjo could return as well. So now that the strike is over, I would expect that we would hear some kind of update from Paramount soon about casting, as well as when this will start filming. And hopefully that will be soon. But again, I wouldn't expect to see this until 2025, perhaps after the airing of the third season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. They may want to, piggyback off Strange New Worlds and get some of that popularity. And, people are already on the service watching Star Trek. Maybe they'll release this during the season even, just to make sure that people who are watching Star Trek see that this film is out there and it makes it more popular. I, for one, am excited for this movie. I know a lot of people are against it. I don't know why, but I think it's going to be really good. Obviously, the cast already, just with the main character, is amazing. And there is a chance we will see other characters return too. So I'm excited for it. This is one of the things I'm most excited for. And I can't wait to see Section 31 when it comes out. The last thing I'm going to talk about, I'm probably not as excited for, if I'm going to be honest, and that is Star Trek Starfleet Academy. In April of 2023, Alex Kurtzman announced that a new series based on Starfleet Academy had been greenlit, and that the series would be geared towards a younger audience than any other series in the catalog. Noga Landau was hired as the showrunner, and she is known for work that she has done on various young adult series that appeared on the CW network. Tawny Newsome, who voices Beckett Mariner on Lower Decks, was also hired as a writer. This series was reportedly building their writer's room before the writer's strike began and have been able to work together since the strike ended about a month ago. So again, we haven't heard a lot about Starfleet Academy, but now that the strikes are over, I would expect some kind of update from them pretty soon, because even though the actor strike just ended, the writer's strike has been over for almost a month. So this series should be creating a writer's room and already working on those first couple of episodes and maybe even talking about casting. There is a strong belief that this series will act as a sort of spin-off from Star Trek Discovery, and that characters and even plot threads that began on Discovery will appear on Starfleet Academy, such as fan favorite Sylvia Tilly, played by Mary Wiseman. Since the series may be tied to events that occurred during the final season of Discovery, expect further announcements about casting and a release window once Discovery Season 5 has concluded. So for instance, Sylvia Tilly, that is a character that almost definitely will appear on Starfleet Academy, but they probably won't announce it formally until we're into the final season of Discovery, because it may give away something that happens during that final season. So if there is casting that's not related to the final season of Discovery, they will probably announce that. But again, if they just created their writer's room, they're probably very early in the casting process, and then they have to work through a lot of people. If it is a young adult series, they probably have to go with a lot of people that aren't really well known, so it might even make the casting process a little bit longer. Why I say I'm not super excited about the show is because I'm not a young adult and I don't watch a lot of young adult shows. I mean, I guess if Gen V is supposed to be a young adult show, I like that one, but I doubt that Starfleet Academy, even though it's also based at a university, I doubt that Starfleet Academy is going to be anything like Gen V. Although if it is, I'm all for it. If they want to do that, I think that'd be pretty cool. But maybe, they'll look at the success of Gen V and pick out certain things from that series, because that is a series that takes place at a university and exists in a much larger, universe. So maybe they'll take some hits from there, but I don't think they'll be doing a lot. But anyway, because of that, I'm not super psyched about Starfleet Academy. I could be wrong. I'll definitely watch it. I'll cover it, on my various channels, but it doesn't seem like it's really steered towards me. So that makes me think that I might not like it. But having said that, this is a series that almost definitely will not appear until 2025 and perhaps even 2026. Like I said, casting can take a long time, and depending on how they want this series to proceed, they might push it quite a ways. But that's everything that Star Trek has in the hopper, so to speak. Let me know, what do you think? What are you most excited for? Probably for me, it's either Section 31, a new season of Strange New Worlds, and a new season of Lower Decks. Although I am kind of interested at how they will handle the final season of Discovery. I'm very intrigued because part of the season was, filmed when they didn't think it was the last season, and part of it was. So I'm really interested to see how the plot kind of progresses because of that. And if I could pick out, what changes were made. I am really excited for the future of Star Trek, and I think you should be too. Let me know in the comments, what are you most excited for? And what are you least excited for as well? I would love to hear that. Let me know down below. So now I'm going to go over reviews for two MCU projects. That would be the second season of Loki, as well as the film The Marvels. First, I'm going to talk about Loki, and when I do, I'm going to first cover non-spoilers. So if you have not seen Loki yet, don't worry. I will tell you when I'm going to go into my spoilers part, and for the first part of my review, it will be no spoilers. Just so if you haven't seen it yet and you're thinking, should I go see it? Should I not go see it? This review is definitely for you. And then if you want to jump forward to my Marvels review, I'm also doing no spoilers and spoilers with that. The time codes are in the description. And also, if you hover on the progress bar on the video, you'll also see where those time codes are at. So first, let's do a no spoilers review of the second season of Loki. When it comes to the first season of the show, I liked it a lot. I thought it was fun, but I definitely liked the second season more. I think the stakes were more well-defined in the second season, and I thought the characters were more well-defined in the second season, and everything just seemed to flow better, and I just really liked it. I thought from start to finish, I didn't think there was really any fillers. I liked kind of the side quests that they went on, and I liked the camaraderie between the characters. I liked the new characters for the most part, and I'm going to talk about the characters. But when you're talking about the characters, first you got to talk about Loki, and really for me, with that character, it's the best character development in the history of the MCU. When you think about that, Tom Hiddleston started with Loki in Thor, which basically he was a bad guy from a movie that no one was supposed to care about. And now through all this character progression, he's made him into a compelling anti-hero. I don't think you ever could have seen that kind of development just seeing that character in that first movie. And I think that that's great. I think that Tom Hiddleston brings a lot to this character. I think Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark is a close second. But I feel like Tony Stark had an easier character arc that was helped by his introduction as the leader of the Avengers. Like, he was always on a path towards being a good guy. As soon as, he had that traumatic event in the first Iron Man and he decided that he wanted to be Iron Man, he was quickly, a part of the Avengers, and he was meeting Thor and he was meeting Captain America, and he was doing all these really good things. He was always kind of on a path, and he was kind of pulled reluctantly along that path to get to, that final point where he sacrifices himself for the, good of humanity. But whereas Loki was completely broken down and then had to figure his way back by himself. In the first season, they just crush Loki. They tell him that basically he doesn't mean anything and that he's destined to lose and that he has to come back from that. And it's not really defined. Like, he's just thrown all these different places like a ping pong. And he all of a sudden in the second season begins to learn what he really cares about. And it's not, power or whatever he thought before he came, to the series, the TVA. He really became this new character by not only seeing the futility of what his life had been, but, how small and insignificant he really was. And if you know the character Loki, him being insignificant is a huge blow. That's the worst thing you can do to somebody who definitely calls themselves a god, saying that, no, you're not a god. You're just this little speck in this huge tapestry. And he was able to come back from that place and not be, twice as bad as he was before. And that's what you'd expect with most villains, right? Like, he would just be like twice as evil as he was before and just double down on what he was doing. No, he did a complete 180. He gets all these close friends and actually cares about people, cares about the universe, and then, goes through what he goes through in the season. I just thought that was really great. And I thought that was great that Tom Hiddleston was able to take that character that we met in Thor and bring him all the way here. I would definitely say that if you were to ask a person who saw the last Thor movie and also saw the second season of Loki, who they would rather see in another thing, would they rather see Chris Hemsworth return as Thor, or would they rather have Tom Hiddleston return as Loki? 90%, I think, would say Tom Hiddleston, and the 10% would probably be, people that thought Chris Hemsworth was better looking than Tom Hiddleston or something like that. Like, literally, I think if you look at the characters, you have to say that Loki is one of the best characters, if not the best character that the MCU has ever produced, and this show made it happen. Speaking of the show, it is visually stunning, and I'm talking about from the CGI down to the practical sets, and not just when they're in the TVA or when they're in the volume, but also when the characters jumped through different moments in time. And I can't really talk about those moments specifically if I'm going no spoilers, but this is Loki. If you know anything about Loki, there's time travel, so that's not a spoiler at all. But when it's practical, it looks really good. When it has to be in this like vast open space with all these lasers shooting everywhere, that looks good too. They really seem to have found the sweet spot with this particular series in regards to using CGI versus practical effects that you pick up. Like, there's guys that wear these really weird like suits that almost look like astronauts that look totally out of place and stuff like that. Everything's tactile, like every button you have to press, nothing is like a touchpad. I really like that aspect of this show. It's of course a carryover from the first season, but I really think they double down. There's definitely some very practical effects that lead into these, huge effects. There's models and stuff like that. It's really good. Even the uniforms and the clothing and the way people talk. I mean, it's really great. I really think there's a great attention to detail on the series, and it really adds to the overall aesthetic. I will also say that I loved most of the cast of this show, especially the inclusion of OB, who's also known as Ouroboros. It's a character played by Ke-Huy Quan, who was the child actor from The Goonies. I also thought that Owen Wilson played a great role, but OB was a great addition to the show. But because of OB, I feel like Sophia DiMartino as Sylvie seemed to get lost in the shuffle of characters at times and disappear. She was a main part of the first season, especially the second half of the first season of Loki. I mean, she's very important to Loki. He's searching for her, but the way that she's kind of in and out of the story, there's a scene, and again, I'm not doing spoilers, but there's a scene where literally she's paused. Like, there's other people in the scene and her character is doing something and she's just paused. She's just standing there doing nothing. That's kind of like what I felt she was doing the whole series, just kind of there, not really needed to be in this. And really, as the series goes on, you learn, how much she's needed and stuff. And it kind of does diminish her as a character to the show. So I thought that was kind of weird. After she was so important to his character in the first season, she didn't seem as important to Loki or the story itself in this season. So that was one character that I kind of thought got lost in the shuffle. And maybe that is because, they have all these other characters that they're adding, and also Owen Wilson needs to get his screen time as well. So I think that Sylvie, unfortunately, kind of suffered because of it. I also didn't love Jonathan Majors' performance. I understand that he was attempting to create distinct personalities for multiple characters, and I will even concede that I don't think he was overacting as much as most reviewers have given him credit for. I do feel, though, his performance as these characters was inconsistent. He would create tics and character traits that seemed to fall away at times. And this is something that I will talk about more in spoilers. But I know that a lot of people are just saying, man, Jonathan Majors just was overacting, in every episode. I kind of think he toned it down. And I know that reshoots were done for this series. But early in the series, yes, he is hamming it up. He's playing for the back row. And there are times where it's just hard to watch him. Like, even to do the simplest task or say the simplest thing, he just goes on and on about just nonsense. And it's really hard to follow him. But I think in the second half of his appearances on the series, he gets better and it's not as distracting. But what was distracting to me was that his characters just seem to fall away at times. And he's not really consistent. As I mentioned, his character, Victor Timely, is very eccentric when we first meet him. And then by the end of the series, he's not nearly as eccentric. And I don't think that he had gone through enough character events to show that kind of progression. Like, not even that much time passes. Again, this is a show that has to do with time travel. So not that much time actually passes for his character to make these jumps. And there's another scene where he plays another version of the character that he literally just drops it. Like, he drops his whole persona as the character, and it's just like a normal dude talking to a normal dude. And I don't know if that was on purpose, but to me, it just seemed really inconsistent. And that's why I didn't like his performance. It wasn't so much the overacting. It was that he couldn't, pick a lane. And I get it. Like, he's trying to develop his own personality for multiple characters, but you kind of gotta, I don't know what you gotta do. If you gotta like watch the dailies from the day before to see what you were doing to make sure you still sound like that. But something about it just didn't sit right with me. Also, unlike most MCU releases, Loki felt self-contained enough that it can stand on its own as a great series and doesn't rely on the success or failure of what comes before or after. And that's something I'm going to talk about a lot in my next review. For Loki, I feel like you only really need to watch the movie Thor, the first one, and maybe the first Avengers movie to understand what is going on with this character in this series. And that is rare for the MCU, where you only have to watch two things. That may sound like a lot to people, but with the MCU, I mean, for the Marvels, I don't even know how many things you'd have to watch, because those are three characters from three different like plot threads converging into one. You don't have this with Loki. It's really just a character study. And I know that the MCU has recently said that they're going to do this Marvel Spotlight thing, which is going to be more character study series. And I feel like that is something that they learned from Loki. And that if you just center on a character and you don't make it about this bigger universe, Secret Invasion is a great example of how not to do a series, because nobody cares. Like, who is the main character of that show? Is it Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury? Because he's never been a main character before. So to have him carry a series that has to do with all these different things, it just didn't work, and it's muddled. And he wasn't even in really the final battle. It was between Daenerys and that green guy. So again, that's the wrong way to do it. Loki is the right way to do it. I feel like you could even just watch the first two seasons of Loki and be fully immersed in this character's development, even without seeing what he did in the Avengers and the first Thor movie. So I love that. And that's something that the MCU needs to learn from Loki and make more self-contained products. Like, I'm a super nerd, so I've seen all these things. There's dozens and dozens of MCU projects that you have to watch before some of these things. And it's just crazy. And I understand why the general public would not want to do that. And Loki, I think, is a blueprint for how you make something successful that does have big stakes, that ties into your MCU universe, but you don't have to be a part of the whole MCU universe to know what's going on this series. Like, it works outwards instead of inwards, if that makes sense. And that, I think, makes the show way more successful than a lot of things that the MCU has done before. So now I'm going to talk about spoilers. So if you have not seen Loki yet, you're going to want to skip ahead. But before you go, what I will say is, if you're on the fence, I would definitely watch Loki if you have Disney Plus. It's only 6 episodes. It goes pretty fast. And the acting is really good. It's beautiful. Like I said, if you haven't seen the other things in the MCU, it's okay. You could just watch the first season, and the second season will make perfect sense to you. So I would definitely watch this. I would recommend it to anyone. And if you're looking for something to watch, I would definitely check out Loki. So now let's talk about spoilers from the second season of Loki. First of all, I love the ending, both visually and thematically. Loki finally fulfilled his glorious purpose and is now the ruler of everything, I guess. That was the only thing that I was kind of ambiguous about. Like, when the ending was happening and he's grabbing all the branches and he makes the tree, I was like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. Like, oh, I love it. This is so cool. But what does this mean? Like, where are we now? Like, I understand that he fixed everything because everything is on its side and everybody's got jobs and everybody's happy and, everything's moving forward. But what does this really mean now for the future of the MCU? I just talked about how it sucks when things have to tie into the MCU. And that's kind of what kind of sucked for me about the ending, is that, like, even as much as I know about the MCU, I don't really understand what happened with, the very, very ending, with him sitting on that throne and like holding all the branches. And now there's like this beautiful tree. I understand that he fixed it. Okay. And I guess maybe that's enough to get me to the finish line. But moving forward, I don't know what this means. And quite frankly, I don't think the MCU knows what this means. I think that when they filmed this ending and when they, pushed it out, I think that they were just like, okay, we're going to do something with this, and it's probably going to be this thing over here, but we're not 100% sure, and we're going to leave ourselves open. So if this movie doesn't do well or this thing doesn't do well, we can change it, And I think that that's kind of where Loki suffered from being a part of the bigger MCU. But besides that, I thought it was amazing. Like, I literally was so enthralled with how the show ended that I didn't think about that, really what it meant until minutes later. So I think that, tip of the hat to the producers on Loki for creating that scene and all those branches and stuff. I just thought that was so cool seeing him, in his costume with the horns. I thought that really was a great way to end the series because it doesn't look like Loki is going to get another season. And I love it when the characters end up looking like their comic book counterparts. I don't think this was, a direct version from the comics, but I think he looked great. It's really hard to pull off that kind of, horned crown. And I thought it looked really cool. So I really liked how the show ended for sure. And in concert with, me talking about the ending, I think the stakes felt real, even though Loki seemed to be able to reset things whenever he wanted. And this was mainly due to how the actors portrayed their ending, as well as the acting of Tom Hiddleston. And this, for me, is an issue I find in many MCU projects. What are the stakes? Are we just saying that the universe is always just a second away from ending? Somebody I saw on Twitter, posted a picture of the ending of the Eternals, where you have part of this like huge god coming out of the planet and he's just frozen there. And it's like we've had all these movies and series. I think he said like 14 combined movies and series since that was released. And nobody has talked about that. Like how many important things happen until nothing is important anymore. And I feel like that in a lot of MCU projects. And I did not feel like that in this series. I really felt the stakes, even though Loki had like an automatic reset button. Like he could keep going back and keep going back. But just the way they did it, like certain little things like when Jonathan Majors and He Who Remains kept getting killed and he would say, see you soon, see you soon. It almost sounded like he was mocking Loki, like even though he was dying over and over again, it didn't feel like his death meant nothing. It felt like he was literally mocking Loki in that moment. Like, you can't kill me. I'm just going to keep coming back and back and back. I just love that. And it's something you don't find a lot in the MCU because everything is happening all the time, in the MCU. And everything, the stakes are always high and the universe is always cracking. And why is this a big deal? In Loki, I felt those stakes just with him, how he felt about the characters around him and how he really cared for his friends and made that ultimate sacrifice at the end. He didn't know he was going to survive. He just went out there because that's what he felt was the only thing that he had left to do. And that was his glorious purpose. So I love that the stakes really felt real in this season. And I think it was harder for Loki to do because of kind of the mechanics of the narrative, the fact that he could go back in time and back in time. So then, the ending doesn't mean anything because it's Back to the Future, right? We can just go back before this happened and change it. Well, Loki kept doing that and doing that. He even took like hundreds of years to learn how to be, an expert in all of this. And it's still, he couldn't do it. I just really like that. And it's so rare for me to find that in an MCU project. And I think Loki really just knocked it out of the park. In the epilogue of this movie, it was revealed that in a new timeline, Victor Timely as a child does not receive the TVA guide. Does this mean that there's no more Kang in the MCU? I know that there are rumors that the studio will pivot to using Doctor Doom as a villain after the poor reception of the latest Ant-Man film, as well as the legal troubles of Jonathan Majors. So at the end, we see that they have changed the timeline and that now Victor Timely did not get the TVA book that we saw him get at the beginning of the season. And this, I guess, means that Victor Timely won't become that version of Kang. Now, there is also a line from He Who Remains that there are infinite versions of him that now Loki will have to go hunt. And some people have said, well, maybe that's what Secret Wars, one of the upcoming films in the MCU, is going to be about. Loki and other superheroes searching for these other versions of Kang. But that was before the ending with him becoming the tree. And so I don't know if He Who Remains at that point meant that that was the way it was before they went back and made it so Victor Timely didn't get the TVA book or after. Like, I don't know if the way that Loki solved the season, if that took Kang out of the picture totally, because I feel like that's what was inferred. But much like the ending with the tree, I feel like it was open because the producers really didn't know what they wanted to do yet. And they left it open. So they were like, well, we can do this or we can do that. And it doesn't really change what we did in this series. So to me, it feels like he's done. I don't think that Kang will be back. And I bet that sooner rather than later, they change the name of that Kang Dynasty movie once they decide who the next villain will be. And it probably will be Doctor Doom. But all in all, I did feel like Jonathan Majors was probably the worst part of the series. Not only was he over the top as Victor Timely, but also because of his inconsistencies like I talked about before. And specifically, what I was talking about with him was there is a moment, I think in the final episode, when He Who Remains is talking to Loki at his desk. And at the beginning, Jonathan Majors sounds like He Who Remains from the first season. But eventually, they're just talking like normal people. Like, I can't say the like exact moment when it happens, but they're just talking back and forth. And he's kind of talking about, it's a scene where Loki reveals that he can stop time. And he's talking to Victor about how to solve things. And He Who Remains is just like dismissive of Victor and like making fun of him and stuff. But that really wasn't the way the character was acting like 5 minutes ago. So again, it's just kind of inconsistent with how he portrays these characters. I bet it was hard creating all these different personalities, but I do feel like he was the worst part of the series. And if they lose him, I don't think that, that's a huge loss. I have seen Jonathan Majors in other things and liked him, but in this show and in the Ant-Man movie, I don't think he was very good. So maybe this isn't just the part for him. But that's my review of the series Loki. Again, I thought it was very good. There were a couple of problems with the ending, but I think the bar is very low for MCU series. And if we're talking MCU series, I think Loki has to be talked about as, if not the best, one of the best that they've ever created. And it's because of the character development of Loki and with some of the other characters that they brought on. I think Tom Hiddleston deserves all the awards, and he did a great job. I know there's a rumor also that he's done as Loki, so that would be interesting. But that is probably a tactic that he is using to get more money to return. And I don't blame him for it because with his performance, he deserves it. But let me know, did you watch the second season of Loki? What did you think? And do you agree with my review? All right, so now let's talk about the film The Marvels. Again, this will be a no spoiler review first, and then there will be spoilers, and I will announce it when I get into spoilers if you have not seen The Marvels yet. And from the box office numbers, there's a good chance that you haven't, because the box office numbers are really bad. But if you strip away all the expectations of this movie and how it affects the MCU both thematically and financially, I thought this was a fun film. I mean, it's definitely not the kind of film you want to really think about too much, and you really just want to be along for the ride. So I think if this was just like a weird movie and not part of the MCU, I don't think people would be as down on it. It definitely has a lot of problems, and I'm going to talk about them in my non-spoiler section here and when we get to spoilers. So for instance, I saw this movie with my 12-year-old daughter, and she liked it. I've taken her to various MCU movies, and I think the only other one that she liked as much as this one was Into the Spider-Verse. So if they're trying to go for like a younger demographic, I think maybe a lot more kids will like this movie because they don't think about things like plot and character development, and why things happen. If you're not thinking about those things and you're just kind of like along for the ride, like you're in the back seat of a road trip or something and you're just there because you got nothing else to do, I think it's okay. I think it's fun. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people have painted it as. And I think that if it was just on its own and not part of the MCU, I think probably a lot more people would like it. I will say that regardless of the perceived success or failure of this movie, the MCU did strike gold with Iman Vellani as Kamala Khan. Her personality is so infectious that she made otherwise unbearable scenes at least a little fun. And again, I'm not going to talk about spoilers, but there is a side mission scene that I will discuss that is really bad from start to finish. And you probably know which one I'm talking about, even if you haven't seen the movie. But it's so bad that the other two main characters in the scene are just completely out of place. Like when they open their mouths or whatever they do, they just seem like they're bored and they don't want to be there. And they literally look out of place, like somebody just CGI'd them into the scene. But Iman Vellani is still a joy to watch, just taking everything in and just dancing in the background. Most times it seemed like she was the only character and maybe even the only actor that wanted to actually be there. And there's just something about Iman Vellani, and I've never seen her in anything else besides this and in her show Miss Marvel. And I really liked Miss Marvel. I probably liked Miss Marvel a lot more than most people that reviewed it. And the thing that I liked the most about it was her family and how she, just as a person, not her being a superhero, but just her and, the actors playing her, I thought was just great. And that definitely translates to this film. She's beyond a doubt the best part of this movie. I think every single review has said that, and I am in concert with them. She definitely is. And it's just her attitude. Like, she looks like she wants to be there. And there are various times where the main characters, the background characters, they just look like they're bored or they're out of place or they just don't want to be there. And she's the only kind of anchor. She's the heart, she's the everything really of this movie. And it seems to me that the people who worked on the Marvels recognized that Kamala Khan would be the breakout star of this movie and attempted to steer both the plot and the marketing towards her, but it may not have been soon enough. I think if she was the main POV character in this movie and just picked up the others along the way, it would have been more successful in the end. Because if they did that, they could center more on Kamala's character development and not so much on this like silly side quest stuff that's going on throughout the movie. And this, like in particular, there is a scene where Kamala starts to learn what it really means to be a superhero, which could have been a great deal of her development in this movie, but instead, she just hugs it out and seems to move on, and it's not mentioned again. And I will talk about it more in spoilers, but it's stuff like that. If they would have spent more time with Kamala, I think that this would have been a better movie. But it's really a amalgamation of the three characters, Monica Rambeau, Carol Danvers, and Kamala Khan. And because of that, you only get bits and pieces of Kamala, and those are the best bits of this movie, and you're just left there wanting more. Captain Marvel is the worst part of the movie, and it isn't necessarily Brie Larson's fault. Her character has been completely inconsistent throughout each of her appearances. So much so, it's almost like we're dealing with a different version of the character each time. An example of that is that when she was first introduced, it was made clear that she was the most powerful character in the entire Marvel universe. Like in one of the Infinity War movies, she takes on the bad guy Thanos, and he's got the Infinity Stones, which are like his power-ups, and she still takes him on one-to-one, just as her being her. But in this movie, she needs the help of two other powered characters, each of whom do not fully understand their powers, to take down really a B-level villain. That just makes me so mad. And I just talked about the inconsistencies in Jonathan Majors' portrayal of his characters on Loki. I think that with Captain Marvel, it's similar, but it's not the same, because I don't really see it as Brie Larson's fault. It's how this character has been written since her introduction. They obviously do not know what to do with Captain Marvel and are just overcorrecting and overcorrecting and overcorrecting every time we see her on screen. Just think about all her appearances, in her own movie, in the Avengers films, in this movie. It's just her power set is all over the place. Her motivations are all over the place. A big thing that she does that links to the first movie is done off screen. Well, that definitely hurts her character development. Like, we should have seen that, and it shouldn't have been exposition in this movie, but it just happens, and we're meant to deal with the consequences without really dealing with what the character had to deal with while they were, doing whatever they were supposed to be doing. Again, I understand no spoilers, so I have to be vague. But even like the villain seems to know more about what happened than she did. And it's just like, what is this character? Who is she? What is going on? And even the end of the movie, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think that Captain Marvel was definitely the worst part of the movie, but I don't think that it's Brie Larson's fault. Everybody wants to blame Brie Larson for some reason. I know that she is like quick to leave this part because the internet is so mean to her, and I don't blame her. But if I was her, I'd be more mad at the writers of this movie and the writers that she's had to work with in the MCU, because they have done her dirty with Captain Marvel. There has never been like a cohesive vision of the character, and it suffered greatly because of it. But if Captain Marvel is not the worst part of this movie, the villain definitely is, or maybe it could be the redundant plotline. I mean, the bad person in this movie is really, really similar to a villain in another MCU movie that I'm not going to talk about because of spoilers. But after you first meet this villain and she says like 3 lines of dialogue, you're like, oh, you're just like that guy that got beat 10 years ago. Like, why am I seeing you again? You're literally the same. Like, why? I mean, again, when I talk about stakes and stuff like that, like, how can you have high stakes in a movie where you're supposed to have the most powerful character in the whole entire universe, and they're going up against this gray villain that has the same powers as somebody that, has already been defeated more than once? So it's just, there's a lot of issues with this movie, and I think the villain is definitely one of them. Again, no fault of the actress, and the actress is actually the wife of Tom Hiddleston, who plays Loki, so another tie-in between those two projects. But I don't think it's her fault. I mean, she does fine with what she is given, and even the ending is ridiculous. Like, with her character, it's ridiculous. So just really bad. I mean, how can you have a good movie without a good villain? It's hard. I think that maybe Aman Vellani could have carried it a little bit more if they gave her more to do. But the mechanics of the movie, the narrative, most of the main characters did not seem like they wanted to be there, and the villain sucks. So it's really hard to find a lot of stuff good about this movie if you really think about it. Again, if you don't think about any of this stuff and are just there and you're watching Aman Vellani and you only have to see this movie once, I think it could be a fun movie. But it's just, if you start to think about like, what was this movie really about? Like, what did it mean? I think you start to get a little bummed out. And that's why the word of mouth on this movie is probably as bad as it is. And the last thing I'm going to say for non-spoilers is I just talked about Loki, and the stakes in Loki seem way higher than in this movie. But the audience is made to believe they are just as high. And this is something I've talked about before. The universe can't always be close to be destroyed if you want the audience to care about it. You have to create something that makes sense without just saying, oh, we're going to do this thing, and if this happens, the universe is gone. Well, I've just watched a dozen movies where the same thing just happened, and different heroes figured out different ways to stop the villain. Why should I care about this B-level gray villain who obviously is not going to stop these three characters? We've got three, superheroes on a team trying to stop her by herself. The stakes just never feel like anything in this movie. And it's a complete opposite of what I just said about Loki. How you really feel like you're in it with Loki and you feel the character going through what they have to go through. You don't, I think, feel like that in the Marvels at all. The only one who is a good POV character is Kamala Khan. And it's not because of necessarily what she's doing. She's just happy to be there. And because of that, it makes you a little happier to be there as well. So, that's kind of my review of the Marvels. If you haven't seen it yet, if you have kids, I think maybe it's a good movie for kids. If you want to wait to watch it on Disney Plus, which it'll probably be on pretty soon, I would say you could probably wait for that. But again, I don't think that Brie Larson is necessarily the problem. I think that the writing on this movie is just all over the place. They figured out through dailies or whatever that Kamala Khan is the best part of this movie, and they try to do things that kind of make her more important, like her family is in it and stuff like that. But everything surrounding her family isn't great either. But I do love them. Like, they were great, but like the plot line part that they were in was ridiculous. I think that they were trying to make it more of a Kamala Khan movie, but they couldn't get it all the way there. So it is what it is, and it's kind of a mess. But, that's my review of Captain Marvel. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So now I'm going to talk about spoilers. So I'm not going to go over the plot of the movie. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you just want to know what happens, this probably isn't the best review for you. But I am going to talk about spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, then I guess this is the end of the podcast for you. Thank you for joining me. My first real issue with this movie started very quickly, and it was that the plot device of the three characters switching places could have been really interesting, but instead it was just confusing. Even though one character says that they switch places, when one or more of them uses their powers at the same time, there are many instances in the movie where this is not the case. And you just have to watch like one fight scene and you'll see they're using their powers at the same time. And I know that they try and do this really cute, like almost dance scene where they're choreographed in the spaceship fighting. And I get that. And that was kind of cute. But like towards the end when they're fighting, they're using their powers and they're not getting switched. I mean, it's very obvious, like in the final battle, there are scenes where this is not happening. So it's like they just forgot about that, or there were reshoots. There was just something very confusing about that plot, device. And I guess it was just needed to get all three characters in this movie, but it didn't really help anything else for the plot. It didn't really bring them closer together at all. I thought that it just kind of like they had that one training montage that every movie has, and all of a sudden they're best friends after not really knowing each other. That really didn't do anything, I think, for the characters. So all in all, I thought the plot device of them switching powers was kind of poorly pulled off. Another thing that I thought was bad about this movie was that Monica Rambeau was not needed for this film at all, except to maybe set up the next MCU thing in the post-credit scene. Not only does she get lost in the shuffle at times, but her powers are completely undefined. At first, it seems like she has powers similar to Sue Storm from the Fantastic Four, but eventually she's even more powerful than Captain Marvel. Now, this is a character that first got her powers in WandaVision, and we have not seen her since. So in this movie, when it starts, she can kind of use her powers, I guess. I mean, she is in an astronaut suit where later in the movie, she doesn't need to be. So either earlier in the movie, she didn't know that she didn't have to be in an astronaut suit, or she was just doing that to like act more human or whatever. Her powers like change throughout the movie, and they don't make sense. When she describes them, she says that I can see light. Girl, you're doing a lot more than just seeing light in this movie. You're passing through things. You're shooting lasers. I mean, you have a different color laser, but you're supposed to have powers that are light-based. That's why your powers are switching. That's another thing that was inconsistent. Why, if the villain had the other bracelet, why wasn't she switching places with the other characters when, they used them? I mean, she had light-based powers, and you can't tell me there were no other characters in the whole MCU universe that don't have light-based powers. So that was just silly. I mean, again, that's just something that doesn't make any sense. And it was just to get Monica Rambeau in this movie, just to kind of set up something between her and Carol Danvers. But I really did not feel that strained relationship. They just were awkward around each other and they didn't know how to act. And then all of a sudden they're cool, and it's another inconsistent character. I thought of another thing that was inconsistent about Captain Marvel. In a prior movie, we found out that she wasn't helping Earth. In one of the Avengers movies, she wasn't helping Earth because she had to help all these other planets. But in this movie, we find out, no, that wasn't the case. She was just helping one planet. She was helping the Skrulls, get on this new planet. So she wasn't doing what she was saying. She was basically just helping one other, race of beings. Again, that makes her character worse. Like, she wasn't being this police officer for the universe. She was literally doing what we wanted her to do on Earth, just on another planet. So again, another inconsistency for that character that has nothing to do with Brie Larson, but just makes it like, how am I supposed to care about this character when every time I see them, they're different? And Monica Rambeau is very similar. She is very different than the last time we saw her on WandaVision, and it's kind of hard to understand that character development. So again, just another swing and a miss for me. Of the three, Kamala Khan is the only one who seems to want to be there in this movie. And even in the scenes with her family, it seems like Samuel L. Jackson is just phoning in his lines. And speaking of Nick Fury, does this movie take place before or after Secret Invasion? I'm not even sure. And his character was definitely supposed to be changed after Secret Invasion, but he didn't seem like that in this movie. So maybe it happened before. I don't know. But again, another inconsistency with the characters, and Kamala Khan is the only character that seems to want to be in this movie at all. The film itself seems to be a microcosm of the state of the MCU's various productions at the time that the movie was made. But since then, it looks like the studio is making changes so that this does not happen again. So because of that, I do not blame the actors or even the director for this movie, but the studio that created this. And I think that that's going to get lost. And I think that everybody's going to talk about the director of this movie. Everybody's going to talk about Brie Larson. But I think that really the studio that released this film is the one that should take the blame, because at the end, they're the one that decides what gets filmed and what gets shown to the public. And this is their failure. But that's just my point of view. Again, I didn't like this movie very much, but let me know, what did you think of my review? Do you agree with what I thought of the Marvels? Did you see it? Are you going to go see it? And do you agree with me that the studio should be the ones to blame for this monstrosity? Well, that is everything I have this time, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for joining me today. Please do not forget to hit that like button before you go, and I'll see you next time on What Did I Miss?